We all do it. We all lie to ourselves about money, and it's time to stop. Because the reality is everything you need to know about personal finance can be written down on a single page. Yes, it really is that simple, and I'm going to show you exactly how simple in this video. Oh, and make sure you watch to the very end to find the only three numbers financially that you need to track. Forget budgeting, forget all that other stuff. There's only three things you need to pay attention to on a regular basis in order to be really successful financially. But before I get into it, I'm going to do that thing that pisses off all the people that think you shouldn't ask for a subscribe or a like until the end of the video. I'm going to ask for it now, but don't worry, you don't have to do it until the very end, and you only have to do it if you actually like the video. But if you do, please don't forget, hit that subscribe and hit that like button so more people like you can see this video. It really helps me grow the channel. I appreciate each and every one of you who's already done it, and those of you who are about to. So let's get into it. Let's discuss the only 10 things you really need to know about personal finance. And I'm not kidding you, everything you actually need to know can be written down on a single piece of paper. In fact, some people like Harold Pollack, the author of The Index Card, suggest that you can actually write everything down on an even smaller piece of paper than that. Because personal finance and getting wealthy over the long run is actually really simple. It's not complicated at all. It really comes down to two things: time in the market and doing your best not to have a catastrophic loss. And by setting up a few simple rules for your personal finances, it becomes really easy to be successful over time. In fact, becoming a millionaire and becoming wealthy is almost a certainty if you start early enough. So let's start with the most obvious one, and the one that every single one of us has heard before. By the way, you've probably heard all of these before because they are simple rules and they're the things that everybody preaches because they work. And this one is no different. Save 10 to 20% of your income every single month. And to make this a little bit more precise, set up an automation with your bank so this money is automatically pulled from your account every single time you get paid and put into an investment of some sort. It is literally a set it and forget it strategy. If the money is not in your bank account and you don't have it there to spend, there's a really good chance that you won't. And over time, the 10 to 20% that you're taking and putting into investments will grow beyond your wildest beliefs. Now, just to give you some numbers, just so you can understand the power of doing just this one thing, let's say you make $60,000 a year in income and you put that 20% aside. After 30 years, you will have more than $1.4 million saved in your investments. Now that's assuming an 8% rate of return, which is pretty reasonable and pretty conservative. And if we stretch out your time horizon from 30 years to 40 years, well, then you end up saving $3.2 million over those 40 years. So it pays to start early. Oh, and if 20% seems like a lot, start with just setting up an automation so 10% of your money comes out of your account every single month. Then, on a monthly basis, increase it by 1% for 10 months, and within the year, you'll be up to that 20%. And by increasing it gradually, you'll get used to spending less money because you'll have less money available in your bank account, and the change and the habits will follow. It's really quite simple. And if you think that they won't, well, you're lying to yourself, which is kind of the theme of this video. The second rule is to avoid investing in individual stocks. Now, I know there's this temptation to want to buy individual stocks and try to beat the market or the S&P 500, but only 7% of professional money managers actually end up beating the market. So if they can't do it, there's a good chance you aren't going to be able to do it. But there's good news. You can buy things like index funds and ETFs that track things like the S&P 500 and make investing very simple. So you set up your automation, your money comes out of your account every single month, that 10 to 20%, and then you have it invested in something like an S&P 500 index fund. The nice thing about the S&P 500 index funds is it tracks the 500 biggest companies in the US, which means that any companies that are on the decline eventually get kicked out the bottom, and new companies that are growing themselves into being in the top 500 companies in the US automatically get added as well. So you get automatic diversification and investment in the 500 best companies in the US. Now, if you're worried about diversification and making sure that you don't lose money as you near retirement, you can also look at things like the Vanguard Target Date Funds. These are funds that are designed to reduce your risk as you get closer to retirement. So let's say your target retirement date is 2050. You invest in the 2050 fund, and as you get closer and closer to that date, Vanguard will automatically adjust the risk in your portfolio so that you end up in a situation where less money is invested in the stock market and more is invested in safe investments like bonds. That way you don't have to worry about a huge market crash right before retirement that wipes out your retirement savings. It's pretty simple. The third rule is to max out your tax-advantaged accounts. The single biggest expense that most people have in their lifetime, in fact, everyone has in their lifetime, is taxes. So when the government gives you things like 401ks and Roth IRAs that have a tax advantage associated with them, you best be using them. So that 10 to 20% that you're pulling out automatically, make sure it's going into an account that is tax advantaged. And if you have an employer that does employer matching on your investments, make sure you're definitely taking advantage of that because that is in fact free money. Don't lie to yourself and tell yourself that it's not worth it because it absolutely is. Taking advantage of employer matching is the single most important financial decision that most people will make when it comes to their investments. Rule number 4 is buy a house at your earliest opportunity. Do not try to time the market here. Don't try to wait for the market to come down or interest rates to come down or play that game at all. Simply get into the market at your earliest opportunity. And what is your earliest opportunity? Well, it is when you can afford both a down payment and you have at least 12 months worth of savings in your investment accounts. Do not jump the gun on this and try to buy a house before you have those two things in place, because I can tell you from experience that you do not want to find yourself in a position where you're house poor. The single worst feeling is wondering whether or not you're going to have enough money at the end of the month to be able to make your mortgage payment. And if you've got at least 12 months worth of expenses in your investments, at least you know that in a worst case scenario like a job loss or an illness, you're going to be okay. Oh, and let's be clear here. There is a distinction between having 12 months worth of expenses and 12 months of income saved up. While having 12 months of income is even better, what you really need is to have 12 months of expenses which cover your housing costs, your food, and anything else that is an absolute necessity. Rule number 5, pay off your credit cards every single month. Do not let a bank take a single penny of interest on credit cards. Now, yes, there are some advantages to using credit cards, things like cash back, things like points for travel, and if used wisely, these can be a benefit. But if there's even a small chance that you might run a balance, stop using your credit cards. In fact, don't use them at all if that is a risk. Because everyone starts with good intentions thinking they aren't going to ever run up a credit card balance. Nobody ever thought for a second, I'm going to apply for a credit card and end up with a $20,000 or $30,000 balance at 12 to 15% interest. But that's what happens. So do everything that you can to avoid finding yourself in that circumstance, including not using credit cards at all if that's what you have to do. Rule number 6 is always have a backup plan. Expect the best and plan for the worst. What's the worst that could happen? Interest rates could go up, you could lose your job, you could get sick and not be able to work. Now, I know those are things that people generally don't want to think about. They absolutely suck to think about. But if you have thought about them, you have planned for them, and you have a backup plan, you never have to worry about them when the situation arises, which means you can live stress-free and in a lot of cases, take more risks, have more fun, and live a better life. So what does having a backup plan mean? Well, first, it means having those 12 months of expenses saved, but it can also mean things like having enough non-perishable food saved up that if you do lose your job or there is some sort of pandemic or natural disaster, you don't have to worry about feeding your family. Oh, and an added benefit to this is if you have 6 to 12 months worth of non-perishable food saved up and you're only buying it at sale prices, well, that is the single best return on your money you will ever get. Saving 25, 30, 40, 50% on things that you know you will have to buy anyways is a far greater return than you'll ever get in the stock market, period. A penny saved is without a doubt far better than any penny earned. Rule number 7 is get life insurance long before you need it. Now, let's be clear, not everybody needs life insurance. If you are going to be single and you're going to have no dependents and you aren't going to rely on anybody else's income and nobody is going to rely on you for your income, you may not need life insurance. But if you plan on having a family at any point in the future, then getting life insurance early is important. The reason why is because the earlier you get it, the cheaper that it is. And a little bit of planning can save you tens of thousands of dollars. And let's not get crazy here. We're not looking at whole life insurance or universal life insurance or any sort of fancy insurance gimmicks. We're simply looking at getting a basic term life policy that is inexpensive at our earliest opportunity. If you're 20, 25 years old and you can get it now, do it. It'll be the cheapest that you can ever get it, and you'll be able to buy significantly more than you'll probably ever need because of how cheap it is. And all the money that you save on that life insurance can be put towards your investments or paying off your mortgage or whatever else you want to do. Maybe have some fun with it. Rule number 8 is avoid leverage at all costs. Now, yes, in order to buy your first home, you're going to have a little bit of leverage in the form of a mortgage in order to be able to purchase the property. But outside of that, avoid leverage at all costs. And what do I mean by leverage? Well, I mean borrowing money in order to make money. So buying things like rental properties or buying stocks on margin or borrowing off a line of credit in order to invest in stocks, all of those things create significantly higher risk than if you didn't do them. And significantly higher risk can create a scenario where your investments and your net worth gets wiped out pretty freaking quickly. Now, that being said, if you have more than enough money saved and you've got enough money that isn't leveraged, then perhaps you can start thinking about buying rental properties, or you can start thinking about investing with a little bit of leverage. But for the most part, this isn't something I would recommend. In fact, I think Warren Buffett said it best. If you're smart, you don't need leverage. And if you're not smart, you definitely shouldn't use it. Rule number 9, track just 3 numbers. There's only 3 numbers you really need to pay attention to. If you don't want to budget, and I'm not saying you shouldn't budget, but if you don't want to budget, if you don't want to focus on your returns and everything else, just focus on these 3 things. The first is your net worth. If on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis, your net worth is always increasing, then you know that you are not spending too much and that more money is coming in than going out. Which leads me to the other 2 numbers you should pay attention to, and these ones probably on a weekly basis, money in and money out. Obviously, you always want the amount of money that's coming in to be higher than the amount of money that's going out. And if you track just these 3 things and you consistently have more money coming in than you have money going out, you will guaranteed win in the money game. And last but not least, rule number 10, make sure you start as early as humanly possible. Many people think that Warren Buffett got rich because he had the highest returns of any investor. But the reality is that's not true. The thing that Warren Buffett had that nobody else had was time in the market. He started earlier and has invested longer than pretty much anybody else, and that is why he's been so successful financially. Yes, there are money managers out there who have gotten a better return than him, but his real success comes from time in the market. So start early, and if you haven't started, the best time to start is now. Oh, and if you're one of those people who can't just take these 10 for what they're worth, because this really is all you need to know about investing, well, check out this video here with 100 money hacks that I learned from YouTube.